My husband found out I was cheating on him when he saw me get out of a car at 3 in the morning with no panties on. Yes, I know. It sounds like a scene from a low-budget movie, but it wasn't. It was real life, my life. And it was the exact moment that everything shattered. We were coming back from a private party. Ricardo, him, the other man, and me. It had been a long night, filled with drinks, low music, knowing glances, and that simmering tension that builds for weeks before it finally erupts. When I stepped out of the car, a little drunk, still laughing at some meaningless joke, I saw him. Marcelo, standing at our front door, his face completely drained of color, as if he'd just witnessed a horrific crash on the city's main avenue. Not a word, just his gaze, fixed on my legs, on my crumpled dress, on the back seat of the car where he knew exactly what had happened. And yes, I felt the emptiness, not just between my legs, but between us. The silence was so brutal that even the car's engine seemed to cut out prematurely, as if refusing to bear witness any longer. Do you want to know how I got to this point? How I went from a married woman, a mother, with a more or less stable routine, to a cheater in the dead of night? Then keep listening, because there are no excuses, only reasons. And sometimes, the reasons are worse than the excuses. When Marcelo saw me get out of the car that night, he didn't react the way I expected. He didn't scream, didn't run to confront me, didn't call me names. He just stared, his lips a thin, hard line, his arms crossed over his chest. Then he turned his back, without a single word, and walked up the stairs to our building. He didn't even wait to see if I was coming inside. He didn't need to confirm what was already obvious. When I got to our apartment, the door was ajar. The hallway was silent, but all the lights were on. I walked in slowly, half expecting an ambush or a dramatic scene, but the only thing I could hear was the sound of my own ragged breath. I went straight to the bathroom, locked the door, and looked at myself in the mirror. I knew that night would change everything. I splashed cold water on my face and took a deep breath. I didn't regret it, at least, not in that moment. What worried me most was Marcelo's calm, the tranquility of someone who isn't just hurt anymore, but exhausted. The next morning, I got up before he did. I made coffee out of habit, but I didn't bring him a cup. I just sat in the kitchen, cradling the mug in my hands, staring out the window. I heard him move around in the bedroom, shower, get dressed, all in silence. When he finally appeared in the kitchen, he looked at me as if I were a stranger. He poured himself a coffee, without a word, and sat down across from me. "Who is he?" That was the first thing he said. I wasn't expecting such a direct question. Not a why, not a how long, just who. I suppose he wanted to put a name to the enemy before deciding what to do. "Ricardo," I answered. I wasn't going to lie. There was no point. He nodded once, his eyes still fixed on his cup. "How long?" "A few weeks," I lied. It had been almost 3 months, but if he was going to hate me, let it be for a little less. "Did you sleep with him?" The question stole the air from my lungs for a second. I could have fudged the details, said it was nothing, that nothing physical happened, that it was all emotional. But I had already crossed that line. There was no sense in pretending. "Yes." He said nothing. He stood up, went into the bathroom, and didn't come out for over an hour. I didn't move. I just sat in that chair, trying not to think about what I'd done, about what would come next, about whether our daughter, Bia, would notice something was wrong. I heard the shower run again, for a long time, as if he were trying to wash something away. When he finally emerged, his eyes were red, but not from crying. Marcelo doesn't cry. He was furious, but with a contained rage that's far more terrifying than any scream. Did you bring him here? No, I answered without hesitation. That much was true. Ricardo had never set foot in our home. Does Bia know him? No. Are you planning on seeing him again? I didn't know what to say. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I didn't know which one would hurt him less. If I said no, I'd be lying. If I said yes, it would be like spitting in his face. I don't know. He looked at me with a mixture of disappointment and contempt that pinned me to my chair. Then he went to the bedroom, grabbed a backpack, threw a few things in, and left the house without saying where he was going. No threats, no slammed doors. He just left. That was the real discovery. He didn't just find out I had cheated. He understood, in that instant, that he no longer cared enough to fight for me. There was no pleading, no drama, just a clean, direct, brutal ending. And that hurt more than if he had screamed in my face or thrown me out of the house. I spent the rest of the day like an automaton. I didn't work. I didn't call anyone. When Bia got home from school, I put on my best face and made her snack, just like always. She sensed something was off. I know she did, but she didn't ask. She just hugged me a little tighter that night before bed, as if she could feel something was broken. And I swallowed my tears, because crying wasn't going to undo what I'd done. The next day, Marcelo didn't come back. No texts, no calls. He showed up that night only to grab more clothes. I was in the kitchen. He walked in, didn't look at me, went straight to the closet, packed a suitcase, and left. Before closing the door, he paused. Don't bother calling me. We will only speak about Bia. And then the door clicked shut. That was the real discovery. It wasn't seeing his wife get out of a car without underwear. It was realizing that the woman he shared his life with no longer existed. And in her place was someone else. Not better, not worse, just different. And he had no interest in getting to know her. It wasn't until the fourth day that Marcelo decided to talk. He'd been staying at his brother's place. I found out from Bia because he hadn't told me a word. I hadn't seen him, hadn't heard from him. If it weren't for his toothbrush and most of his clothes being gone, I could have sworn he still lived there. That afternoon, he came back. It was 7:30, just as I was finishing up Bia's dinner. He walked in unannounced, with a determined stride, his face hard as stone, and asked me to join him in the living room. Bia was watching cartoons on her tablet, so I just nodded and followed him. He sat on the sofa without taking off his jacket, crossed his arms, and looked at me as if I were a stranger who had just broken into his home. I want to understand what the hell happened to you, he began, his tone blunt. No shouting, but a tension that cut right through my skin. I sat across from him, clenching my hands between my knees to keep them from shaking. I don't know what to tell you, I replied, my voice quieter than I wanted. Don't give me that, Carla. Don't give me that bullshit. You know exactly what happened. I just want to hear it from you. Why? What were you missing? What did he do that I didn't? What pushed you to fuck everything up like this? I swallowed hard. For days, I had tried to rehearse an answer in my head, but in that moment, they all felt pathetic. No explanation seemed sufficient. Nothing I could say would sound logical or fair to him. It wasn't premeditated. It started as a stupid thing. We were just texting, that's all. And how do you go from texting to fucking in a car? He cut in, his voice level, but his eyes burning with a contained rage. It wasn't like that. It wasn't that simple. It was something that built up. I felt like I needed something more, something I didn't have here anymore. I don't know how to explain it. Try, because I needed a lot of things too. And I didn't go find another woman. Do you know what it's like to have a bad day at work? To come home and have no one even look you in the eye? You think that only happened to you? His voice began to tremble, not with emotion, but with pure exhaustion, from holding too much in for too long. I'm not saying it was your fault. I tried, but he cut me off with a wave of his hand. Of course not, because you did this alone. No one pushed you. No one forced you. This isn't a couple's problem. This is your decision. At some point, you decided that what we had wasn't worth respecting. That's what fucks me up. You did this knowing it would destroy me, and you did it anyway. I didn't know what to say. I sat in silence, a lump in my throat, feeling like I no longer had the right to even defend myself. He looked down, took a deep breath, and rubbed his forehead with the palm of his hand. I don't know how we move on from this. It hurts to even look at you, and I don't want Bia to see us like this, like we're enemies. But I can't pretend either. I don't want this to destroy everything, I finally said, though I didn't even believe my own words. Too late. You already did, he shot back. And for a split second, his voice cracked. He didn't cry, but I saw him blink a little too much. I didn't do it to hurt you. I didn't plan it, I insisted, knowing how weak the excuse sounded. Well, congratulations, Carla, because even if you didn't plan it, you succeeded. You've hurt me more than I ever thought possible. He stood up and walked to the doorway, stopping with his hand on the frame, his back to me. I'm not sure I want to fix this. I'm not going to tell you today what I'm going to do, because even I don't know. But for now, we keep this between us. Bia doesn't need to know. Not yet. You'll take her to school and pick her up. And when I come over, I'll talk to her like always. Not a word in front of her. Understood? Understood. And I don't want you with him. Not a text, not a call, not even a look. If I find out you're still in contact with him, you won't just end up alone. I will make sure Bia stays with me. And I have more than enough proof for a judge to listen. I just nodded. It wasn't the time to argue. I didn't even care about the threat of custody. In that moment, all I had left was silence. And that silence lasted for the rest of the night. Marcelo didn't do drama, but he was no fool. When he told me he wanted Ricardo gone, he was deadly serious. For the next 2 weeks, he held up his end of the bargain, the perfect, polite father. But he was no longer the man I had married. There was something calculated in his every move. He kept his composure in front of Bia, but when we were alone, his silence was surgical, as if every unspoken word was a warning. I didn't push for another conversation. I didn't try to explain myself again. It was clear that anything I said would only make things worse. What I didn't know was that Marcelo had no intention of settling for my regret. What he did was far more intelligent than any fight or screaming match. One morning, while I was still asleep, Marcelo took Bia to school, just as he'd promised. It was a Friday. He came back mid-morning, just as I was in the kitchen making coffee. He walked in without a word, sat down at the computer, and stayed there for almost an hour. Then he printed something and left again, without even a glance in my direction. I had the sinking feeling that something was moving beneath the surface, but I had no idea what. That afternoon, he returned with the same cold demeanor, locking himself in his office until dinner. Over the weekend, he barely spoke to me, but I noticed he spent a lot of time on his phone, typing. He didn't bother hiding it. He had nothing left to hide from me. On Monday, he made everything clear. I'm taking Bia for the week, he told me, as the three of us had breakfast. Bia was distracted by her tablet, so he said it in a flat tone, like someone commenting on the weather. Why? Because I want to. And don't worry, we're not going to discuss this in front of her. I didn't answer. I let it go, though I knew he was starting to move his pieces on the board. I thought it was a temporary punishment. It wasn't. 2 days later, an email arrived from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line just said, Ricardo. I opened it without thinking. It was a shared folder, filled with screenshots of my conversations with him, photos from our meetings. There was even a short video, filmed from a distance, of us kissing on a bar's balcony. But what hit me the hardest was a note that read, If you decide to see him again, all of this will be sent to his office and to Bia's school. I see. Marcelo hadn't just gathered proof. He had invested time in building something meticulous, cruel, and brutally effective. He didn't need to scream at me or insult me. This was enough to turn my entire life upside down. I called his cell without thinking. He answered on the second ring. What the hell is this? It's exactly what it looks like, he replied, with the same calm you'd use to report a power outage. And if you ever text him, call him, or see him again, his family, his bosses, his girlfriend if he has one, and even the parents in the school's WhatsApp group will know all about it. The choice is yours. Are you sick? No, Carla, I'm furious, and I'm methodical. You thought you could screw me over and I'd just sit back and take it. You were wrong. He hung up. I didn't know whether to cry or break something. I just sat down on the kitchen floor and stayed there for a long, long time, thinking of nothing at all. Marcelo was making it clear that he wouldn't fight for me, but he also wouldn't let me go without consequences. He wasn't interested in physical revenge or public ruin. He simply wanted me to feel precisely what he had felt: powerless, humiliated, afraid, and he was succeeding. The worst part was how he did it silently, with surgical precision. That night, when he returned with Bia, he acted as if nothing had happened. He asked about her day, helped her with her homework, read her a story. I sat in silence, not knowing how to move, not sure if I was free or trapped in a web from which there was no escape. The next morning, before leaving for work, he left a printed sheet of paper on the table. It was a list. At the top it read, Conditions for continuing to live under the same roof. I read each point with my heart in my throat. No dating, no social media, no changing my phone password, permission for him to review my email, And the worst one, zero contact with Ricardo, neither in person nor by electronic means. Any breach of contract, and the file would be sent without warning. I don't know if it was revenge or simply a way to maintain control, but it worked. I never wrote to Ricardo again. I blocked him everywhere. I deleted everything, not because I wanted to, but because I was afraid. Marcelo had turned me into a prisoner of my own actions. And the worst part was knowing that, while I silently begged for forgiveness every night, he had already started living a different life. I returned everything he had ever given me, but not in the way he expected. And now, he was the one who decided how much it would cost me to stay. There was no set date for our last conversation, just a moment when silence was no longer useful. 3 weeks had passed since Marcelo had imposed his conditions. I had followed every single one, not out of conviction, but because I knew any misstep would be a weapon used directly against me. I moved carefully around the house, avoided his eyes, and offered no opinions on anything that wasn't strictly necessary. I became almost invisible so as not to provoke a reaction. He didn't say much, but he watched everything. That night, however, was different. Bia was having a sleepover at her cousin's house, and for the first time in a long time, we were alone at home, with no excuses to avoid each other. I had dinner before he did, cleaned everything up, and locked myself in the bedroom. 10 minutes later, I heard him open the door and come in. He walked to the closet, took off his jacket, and sat on the edge of the bed. He spoke without looking at me. "I'm requesting a transfer at work," he said, his voice neutral, almost professional. "They're sending me to Brasilia in September. The contract is for 3 years." I listened, unsure if that meant he was going alone or if he expected us to follow. I sat up slowly, not knowing what expression to wear. "And Bia will be with me on alternate weeks. I'm not going to take her from her mother, but I'm not going to let her grow up seeing this. As for you, you can do whatever you want. You can stay here, find another place, move in with your parents. I'm no longer interested in what you do with your life." I struggled to swallow, not because I didn't already know, but because hearing it said aloud was a blow more solid than anything that had come before. "Don't you want to fix this?" I asked, the words taking effort. "No," he replied without hesitation. "I want to move on with my life without having to look at someone who chose another man before even talking to me. There's no fixing this. And don't tell me it was a mistake. It was a choice. You didn't just stumble into it. I did everything you asked. I didn't talk to him. I didn't go out. I didn't do anything." "Exactly. You did nothing. You stayed here in silence, following conditions as if it were a punishment. You didn't do anything for me, only out of fear. And what did you want me to do? I wanted you to be honest from the beginning, not to hide like a teenager, to look me in the face and say, 'I don't want to be with you anymore.' That's it. That's all. But you preferred to fuck everything up without a word." He stood and walked to the door, but paused before leaving. "Look, Carla, I don't hate you, and that's the most fucked up part of all this. Because if I hated you, it would be easier. But I feel nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just a kind of void that I have no intention of filling with you. For Bia's sake, we can at least be civil. For Bia, I will be polite. I will be present. I'll talk to you as much as necessary, but us no longer exists. You killed it the night you came home in that car, laughing like you were someone else. I didn't move. I just sat on the bed, unable to look away. He left without closing the door. In the hallway, I heard him take something from the entryway closet, an envelope. He came back into the room and placed it on the nightstand. These are the divorce papers. There's no rush, but when you're ready, we'll sign. Is that what you want? It's what I need. And if I say I want to try, I wouldn't believe you. He waited another second, as if expecting me to say something more, but I said nothing. The words wouldn't come. He nodded as if to himself and left. The divorce was signed on a Monday afternoon. There was no ceremony, no final argument, not even an attempt at reconciliation. Marcelo was punctual. He arrived with the folder under his arm, greeted the lawyer, and signed the papers without reading them. He already knew them by heart. Then he stood up without looking at me. I signed after him. My hands were shaking, not from nerves, but from the contained rage I felt at myself for letting everything end this way. When we left the office, he walked a few feet ahead of me. He didn't say goodbye, didn't turn around, didn't make a single gesture. He just got in his car and drove away. I stood on the sidewalk, watching him disappear. I thought about sending a message, something brief, something to close what we never even knew how to properly open. But I didn't. I knew any word would be ignored. Bia didn't ask many questions. She just wanted to know if we were going to move, if Daddy was going to live far away, if she could still go to the same school. I answered everything as naturally as possible, as if these decisions were made for practical reasons and not because of the emotional wreckage I had left behind. Marcelo was firm but fair with her. He treated her as he always had, with affection, with attention, with that calm way he had of explaining the world without embellishments. I don't know if he will ever forgive me for what happened, but for now, at least he doesn't look at me with contempt. He hugs me in the morning and says, "I love you." And for him, that is enough. Returning to a routine without Marcelo was easier than I had imagined. Not because I didn't miss him, but because my mind had already disconnected from him long before, even if I didn't know it. What was truly difficult was accepting that there would be no second chance, that this wasn't a crisis that could be solved with therapy or with time. This time, there was a clear decision, a line drawn that neither of us was willing to cross again. I was forced to face what I had done from an uncomfortable place, stripped of the protective shield of regret. Because no, I didn't regret all of it. I didn't regret feeling something new, of seeking something I no longer had. What hurt was the way I did it, doing it in secret, denying the obvious for so long, causing unnecessary harm. I learned that cheating isn't just the act itself, but everything that surrounds it, the daily lies, the constant fear of being discovered, the cowardice of not facing things when there was still time. Ricardo disappeared from my life almost at the same time as Marcelo. There was no confrontation, no goodbye. I simply stopped responding. I erased his number, deleted every digital trace, not because I wanted to save anything with Marcelo, but because I understood that Ricardo was nothing more than an escape valve, a cheap escape. He didn't insist either. I suppose he realized that for me, He was never a possible destination, just a temporary distraction. Today, I don't even know if he's still in the city, and I don't care. I don't want to know. My closest friends asked what had happened. Some knew, others suspected. I wasn't completely honest with any of them. I just said that Marcelo and I had grown apart, that the relationship had become unsustainable, that we had taken different paths. Only one of them, Juliana, told me what I didn't want to hear. What you did can't be fixed, but at least now you don't have to pretend anymore. I didn't say it to her then, but she was right. Living a lie is far more exhausting than facing the consequences of your own decisions. It's harder to look at your daughter and know that you were the one who broke that stability, but it's also more honest. I'm learning to live with that. I've started working more hours. I enrolled in a photography course on Tuesday afternoons and on the weekends when Bia is with Marcelo. I try not to stay locked up at home. Sometimes I go out alone for a drink, to read in a cafe, to watch people walk by, knowing nothing about me. Other times, I just stay on the sofa, watching shows without thinking too much. I'm not waiting for someone new to appear. I'm not interested. Not now. Maybe later, or maybe never. I don't know. What I do know is that if I am ever with someone again, it will be from a different place. Not from need, or from emptiness, or from the fear of losing what no longer exists. It will be with everything clear from the beginning. No betrayals, no lies, no cowardice disguised as silence. This story doesn't have a happy ending or a tragic one. It just has closure. And sometimes that's the most you can ask for.